In the year 2636 AD, humanity is at war with a force from beyond the stars. An alien menace has returned with an alien army of fleshy, robotic, and insectoid soldiers to overwhelm the planet's fighting forces. But all hope is not lost. Two soldiers step up as Earth's protectors, prepared to fight the invading alien forces side by side and hopefully postpone mankind's extinction. Aloha, my name is Mike and I'm a former US Navy Seabee. I'd like to welcome you to the Gaming Road Warrior channel, where we talk about retro games from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Today, we're going to take a look at a game that pushed the limits of the Super Nintendo and blew my mind back in the 90s. Contra III: The Alien Wars. First released in North America on March 26, 1992. Contra III is a fast-paced, action-packed, run-and-gun game for the Super Nintendo that takes everything we loved about the original Contra games and cranks up the action several notches. Seriously, playing some of these levels back in the day felt like this. In this episode, we'll talk about my personal story with it, go behind the scenes to talk about the game's development, story, characters, gameplay, and some secrets that make Contra III a timeless classic. Plus, we'll also take a second look at another retro gem in the 90s game break, True Lies for the Super Nintendo. Get ready to lock and load, side-scroll, dodge projectiles, and fight whatever the heck this is. Because it's time to hit the throttle to the gaming wasteland. Throughout the 80s and into the early 90s, Konami carved out a legacy of fast-paced, brutally difficult, and incredible rewarding arcade-style games. Their catalog was stacked, but one franchise always stood out: Contra. Known for its explosive action and unforgiving co-op chaos, it became a favorite among players looking for a serious challenge. For me, Contra III: The Alien Wars wasn't just another game, it was personal. It was one of the first titles I ever owned for the Super Nintendo, and the story of how I got it still sticks with me. Back when I was a kid, my NES didn't live at home. It stayed at my Aunt Betty's house. She wasn't strict with me the way my stepfather was. At her place, I had more freedom. I'd help her out by stacking firewood by her stove, feeding the horse, and taking care of the Australian Shepherd. In return, she gave me something priceless: a safe place to play video games. She had one simple rule: finish your homework first, and I always did, because the reward was worth it. That Christmas, my world changed. My mom, my aunt, and even my stepsister Tammy, who didn't have too much to give at the time, pulled their money together and surprised me with a Super Nintendo and 3 games. I had no clue they were all in on it. I remember unwrapping the presents and seeing The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening, Final Fight 2, and then Contra III: The Alien Wars. The box art alone stopped me in my tracks. It looked epic. Out of all the 3 games, Contra III stood out immediately. The kind of game that practically demanded to be played first. And once I fired it up and saw that opening cutscene, I was hooked. The city in ruins, the alien invasion. It felt like I had to avenge something, even if I was just a kid holding a Super Nintendo controller. This wasn't just a solo experience either. Contra III became the game I brought over to friends' houses. We'd slam back, jolt cola, crowd around the TV, and see how far we could make it. Easy mode, beat it. Normal? Maybe? Hard mode. That was the holy grail we never quite reached. Still, every attempt was a blast, and it was wild seeing how far the series had come from its NES roots. Years later, I got a chance to share the same experience with my son Jayden. He's 15 now, and we started with easy mode just like I did. It was his first time with Contra III, and watching him get pulled into the chaos and intensity of a full circle movement. We haven't beaten hard mode yet, but we're working on it, and now it's our thing. Konami's bombastic shooter first blasted its way into arcades and our hearts back in 1987, where it became an instant hit around the world. The NES port that came along a year later brought all of the action into your living room, and most fans would say it's the superior version of the experience. And I agree, I think the NES port is way better than the arcade version. Since the NES version was so popular and sold so well, bringing the sequel, Super C, over to Nintendo's home console was a no-brainer decision that resulted in another win for Konami. However, while both Contra and Super C made a splash on the NES, Nintendo was working on something new. Of course, I'm talking about Super Nintendo Entertainment System, better known as the SNES.
Decide to step up to this kind of power, this kind of challenge, this kind of flying, crashing, feeling. When you decide to get serious, there's only one place to come: the games of Super Nintendo. No one else creates this kind of experience, because no one else creates these kinds of games. Now you're playing with power, superpower.
Making the jump to a 16-bit system from an 8-bit one gave the developers a lot more to work with, and the new hardware allowed for bigger, more impressive, more exciting games. And boy, when Konami figured out what the SNES could do, they really ran away with it. They threw everything and the kitchen sink at the next game in the Contra series, resulting in one of the most over-the-top, crazy, non-stop action games on the brand new console. But maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's talk about how Contra III was made. When Konami decided to pull the trigger on Contra III in 1991, they put Nobuya Nakazato in charge of its development. It was only his third year at Konami and his first major project, but it's not like he was flying blind. He did some playtesting for Super Contra. He was a fan of the original Contra arcade game, and he's credited with directing 1991's Laser Invasion for the NES. If you missed that one, here's a commercial for that crazy headset/controller thing it was designed to use.
Say it.
Video game.
And it happens.
Laser scope.
Introducing Laser Scope from Konami for NES Zapper games. Just scope your target, then give the command. With the power in your voice and a fire in your eye, you can live the future of video adventures. Start living it now with Laser Scope from Konami. More power than you ever imagined.
Although Nakazato wasn't a veteran Konami developer or anything, he put together an excellent team for his project, and he brought a ton of awesome ideas to the table. When the team got down to work, Nakazato made some minor changes to the established Contra presentation that ended up making a big impact. First, he had a sound team create more cinematic sounding music for the stages to emphasize the series' overall low-budget action movie theme. Because he felt like the action in previous games was too realistic and grounded for a video game, Nakazato wanted to include comedic elements that made the gameplay experience more memorable and fun. I'm going to talk more about these segments in a little bit, but for anyone who remembers the game, I'm definitely going to mention the missile level. If you know, you know. Lastly, Nakazato noticed a growing trend towards slower-paced, role-playing and strategy games, taking over home consoles. A Contra game was never going to fall into either of these categories. but he wanted to take things even further in the opposite direction by establishing a concept that something interesting had to happen every 3 seconds of gameplay. If you ever stop to wonder why Contra III is so constantly entertaining, this concept had a lot to do with it. Nakazato and the Contra III dev team got to work in Konami's swanky new Tokyo office for the entirety of the development cycle, and they were even able to work in close proximity to the team that created the original Contra, which was openly helpful. Nakazato was able to share his team's progress at several points, and the original Contra team gave it glowing feedback. Fun fact, early on in development, Contra 3 was actually known as Contra 4. This was because the spin-off title Contra Force for the NES was intended to be the third installment in the series at some point, but that changed long before its release. In fact, Super Contra released a whole 7 months after Contra 3. Aside from these handful of changes, Contra 3 largely builds on the core mechanics that made the Contra games popular around the world. Awesome weapons, strategic power-ups, side-scrolling action, and most importantly, co-op gameplay. After roughly a year of development, Contra 3: The Alien Wars launched for the SNES in North America on March 26, 1992. It arrived in the middle of the heated console wars of the early 90s, with both Sega and Nintendo releasing follow-ups to their home consoles of the late 80s.
What Nintendo don't? The 16-bit Genesis system by Sega. Genesis does it all.
Sega's Genesis is Nintendo's nemesis. It's one of 2 16-bit systems that are already in the US. Sega clearly hopes to leapfrog Nintendo by touting 16-bit's advantages.
You get better graphics, more levels of play, better animation on the screen, longer games, just more fun to play. Our sales right now are up about 50% versus a year ago at the consumer level. The market is down. I think that's an indication of where the consumer is going.
Nintendo, however, does not plan to relinquish any ground. It says technology's only one thing.
First and foremost, it's games. It's always games. It's like opening up a new movie theater that's got 16 stereophonic sound. If you don't have any fun movies to watch, who's going to go?
Until Nintendo debuts its Super System.
Contra 3 landed less than a year after the SNES hit the market, and effectively served as a visual spectacle and gameplay showcase for what could be done on the hardware with the right creative team. Far from the previous games, Contra 3 pushed the boundaries of what a side-scrolling action game could be, and the changes the development team made paid off in a big way. The game was reviewed incredibly well, and it further established the SNES dominance of the home console market, which was unfortunate for Sega, but great for anyone who wanted to play an incredible action game with arcade-level quality at home. Now let's dig into the game itself. Let's face it, no one plays Contra games for the plot, but at least the setup for Contra 3's storyline is simple enough. After being defeated twice in the previous Contra games, Red Falcon unleashes a shocking surprise attack on a futuristic major city that leaves it in ruins and kicks off the beginning of the, you guessed it, Alien Wars. The opening cinematic is still pretty spooky and effective even today, but then we're introduced to the game's heroes and well, things start to get a little silly. So this is Jimbo and Sully. Yes, those are their actual names. At least, those were the names in the North American version. Other versions of the games still featured Bill Reiser and Lance Bean from the previous installments. Why were their names changed? Well, the original North American releases of Contra and Super C had the years they were set in changed from the far-off future of the 2630s to 1987, so that the games could capitalize on the popularity of the Rambo and Predator movies. So, in order to have things make sense while bringing the third game hundreds of years into the future, it stars the descendants of Bill and Lance. The more you know. Timeline shenanigans aside, I have a soft spot for Contra 3. so I actually love the way it embraces its silliness. However, I definitely understand that it might not land that way for everyone, especially younger gamers. Let me know in the comments if you think Jimbo and Sully are good names for video game characters. And hey, at least we got them. Europe got these weirdos to get around censorship laws. The Probotectors? What kind of name is that? Anyway, Contra 3 is pretty light on story after its opening sequence. After that, it's non-stop action from one crazy set piece or location to the next one, which really makes the experience fly by. But then again, the entire game is only 6 stages, so it would go by pretty fast either way. Now we can finally talk about what makes Contra 3 so special. Its gameplay. This game never holds back. You're thrown from city streets to jungles, airborne battles, and so much more by the time the credits roll. And Nakazato's 3-second rule really keeps the game interesting and moving along at a high speed. The running and gunning is obviously fantastic thanks to tight controls, a massive arsenal with weapons like homing missiles, laser beams, and a freaking flamethrower. However, that's not all Contra 3 does to keep players entertained. There are a ton of new mechanics, like the ability to hold 2 weapon power-ups and switch between them strategically, and new mobility options like climbing walls and hanging from certain surfaces. All of these things combine with some incredibly imaginative level design to create moments that I've never been able to forget. Remember that missile level I mentioned earlier? Here's what I was talking about. Yeah, this is what makes Contra 3 incredible, completely insane, and hilarious cinematic moments like this that make the game feel completely different from moment to moment. I'm not as crazy about the 2 top-down stages in the game. I don't think many fans actually like those, but the sheer variety of gameplay still makes me say wow out loud pretty regularly. And boy, each and every boss fight is just as memorable as it is fun to play. I already mentioned that the game is short, but don't worry about breezing through it. It's definitely not easy. Contra 3 is still tough as nails, just like the ones before it, and this time the infamous Konami code doesn't work, so there's no way to add free lives instantly. However, I still find myself laughing my butt off even when alien enemies are blasting me out of the sky, or wiping the floor with me. This game is just so much fun. Now let's talk about Contra 3's pros and cons. Pros: insanely fun run and gun gameplay, epic boss battles, each more insane than the last, a wide variety of weapons and upgrades, incredible cinematic action sequences, top-notch co-op gameplay. Cons: the difficulty is brutal. You will die a lot. Short game length, though you'll definitely replay it for the challenge. No real story beyond the intro scene.
'90s Game Break.
Alright, let's talk about one of the most surprisingly awesome movie tie-in games from the Super Nintendo era, True Lies. Based on the 1994 Arnold Schwarzenegger action comedy, True Lies for the SNES skips the talking and jumps straight into the bullet-blasting mayhem. You play as Harry Tasker, mild-mannered husband by day, elite secret agent by, well, also by day. There's no stealth here, just pure top-down run-and-gun carnage from the moment you hit start. What makes this game shine? First off, the controls are tight. You're running around military bases, snowy outposts, and shopping malls with a full arsenal. Pistols, shotguns, machine guns, flamethrowers, or even grenades. And the best part? You can unload everything into a room full of enemies and just watch the chaos unfold. Each level is packed with enemies who swarm fast, and there's no shortage of civilian bystanders running around like it's Black Friday. If you shoot one by accident, you're penalized. So yeah, you've got to have to aim, and a little discipline. But let's be honest, most of us just went full commando. The graphics are solid for its time, with detailed environments and big, satisfying explosions. The soundtrack? Totally 90s action movie energy, fast, intense, and totally fitting for an Arnie-fueled rampage. What really sells True Lies, though, is how well it captures the over-the-top action vibe. It's not trying to be deep, it's just trying to make you feel like a one-man army. It succeeds. If you're into retro action games, this one still holds up. It's tough, stylish, and way better than most movie games from the time. Just be ready for a real challenge and maybe a few accidental civilian casualties. Overall, Contra III: The Alien Wars is an absolute blast, and definitely a highlight of the Super NES library. While it doesn't have a story worth remembering, the fantastic gameplay, swift pacing, and tight action will definitely keep you coming back for more. The over-the-top battles, the variety of weapons, and the exhilarating co-op experience make it one of the best action games on the system. Overall, if you're a fan of old-school action games, gameplay that really test your skills, or even if you're just looking for a great nostalgia trip, Contra 3 is definitely worth your time. A ton of games have come out since, but there aren't many of them that hit the same number of highs in such a short amount of time. I want to take a moment to give a special shout out to my son Jayden. I gave him the NES Mini for Christmas in 2016, and the SNES Mini the following year in 2017, his very first consoles. We even hooked up my original NES I had as a kid, and I'll never forget watching him get hooked on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game. He loves that one. Now, I know you're big into Minecraft these days, buddy, and that's cool, but I wanted to dedicate this video to you. If one day I'm no longer around and you find yourself watching this, just know the 8th episode is for you. I never got a chance to record myself playing games with my mom, and I regret that to this day. She was a gamer too, and even though I used to be mad at her for marrying someone who didn't like kids, I get it now. We were really struggling and she just wanted to give us a better life. But this right here is my way of making sure you and I are forever connected, a memory preserved, you playing games with your old man. I love you, son, and if you ever feel sad or life gets a little too heavy, watch this video. And that wraps up this look at Contra III: The Alien Wars. What do you think? Do you agree with its status as one of the best Super Nintendo games? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Take care and remember, gaming is your road to adventure. Take care, folks.